Welcome to the Dennis Maniloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. This is Season 1, Episode 9, and I come to you in a good mood as we tape on Monday night, May 24th, for a number of reasons. I will start with the big news over the weekend in the sports world in general, but specifically the world of golf. Phil Mickelson won the PGA championship. He is 50 years old and 11 months and a few days. He's going to turn 51 on June 16th. Phil Mickelson became the oldest major champion in the history of the game. And it's great news. It was a event that transcended golf, even transcended sports, because it involved Phil Mickelson, who is a favorite of many, including me. I have been a fan of Phil, P-H-A-N of P-H-I-L, basically since he broke in at the PGA level in the early 90s. He even won a tournament as an amateur. He was coming out of Arizona State, and he won a pro tournament as an amateur. But I kind of locked on to Phil in the early 90s, and I've been a fan of his ever since. The big fan of his, as those who know me well can attest, kind of crazy how I have ridden the highs and lows of a Phil Mickelson career. And with Mickelson, you know you're going to get highs and you know you're going to get lows. That's just how it is. Well, with Phil, it hasn't been easy to be his fan, as I said, because of the roller coaster that you're going to be on with him, his style of play, some of the things that he does golf-wise on the course, because he's always represented himself well. He's a fan favorite, not just me, as I said. There are plenty of people like him. But I kind of saw myself. I said, well, if I was ever going to be a pro golfer, what would I look like? And Phil Mickelson fit the mold for me, or the mold. I mean, he and I are similar height. We're close to the same age. And we're both left-handed. I know he was naturally right-handed and was mirroring his dad, so that's how he became a left-handed player. But I just saw a lot of similarities in Phil, so I said, he's going to be a fun guy to follow. And this was, of course, before I knew how wild of a ride it was going to be. And if you're a legitimate Phil fan, as I was, once you get on the train, you're not going to get off it. You're forced to take that wild ride with him. Now, there are times where you will disown him. You'll want to pretend like you're not a fan of his, which happened to me on Twitter a few times. I'll get to that in a bit. But that's part of being a Phil. You always come back. You always come back if you're a fan of Phil. And so going into the PGA Championship, as much as I like him, I had zero expectations for him. He just wasn't even on my radar. I was thinking more like, all right, Phil, why don't you play more senior tour events and, move on, if you will, from the regular tour. Even though in April he had finished T21 at the Masters, and I believe he bogeyed the 72nd hole. Otherwise, he would have finished in the top 20 at the Masters. I still felt like the senior tour was calling him because he was eligible, obviously, at age 50, and he'd won his first two starts on the senior tour. But Mickelson is a very confident guy, and he still believes he can play with the big boys, as it were, the young big boys. So he was going to keep playing, but he hadn't been really playing well at all heading into the PGA Championship. 0 top 20 finishes in 17 straight starts on the PGA Tour. And as I said, a little bit misleading because of the 2020 Masters, he was T21. But you get the point. He really wasn't in contention for 4 days in a PGA Tour event for a long time. 0 top 10s in majors since the 2016 Open Championship, the British Open, when he had his duel with Henrik Stenson, and should have. And I mean, if it hadn't been for Stenson, Phil would have yet another major. But because Stenson and Mickelson were so good in that Open, I think third place was 11 shots behind Phil. I think it was J.B. Holmes. So it was really unfortunate that Stenson had to get in the way of my boy Phil winning a second British Open championship. Anyway, Mickelson was not playing well entering this past week's PGA Championship. The odds makers had him. The most quoted number is 200-1. And what does Phil do? He goes out and he wins it. Oldest major champion of all time, and just shocks the world, shocks all these young guns and big bombers on the longest major championship course in terms of yardage in the history of the game, I'm fairly sure. So many things were stacked against Phil, including his final day pairing, Brooks Koepka. Koepka, the young gun, the 31-year-old. Yes, he's been dealing with a knee issue coming off of surgery, but he had won back-to-back U.S. Opens and back-to-back PGA championships. And so I think it was 18, 19 were his PGAs. So when Koepka was paired with Phil in the final round, you figure, all right, Koepka's going to assert himself, and the great fairy tale story of Phil Mickelson will finally fade. And after the first hole, Mickelson had given up his one-shot lead, and Koepka led by one, and you're thinking, all right, here we go. Well, the very next hole, course is reversed. Koepka ran into trouble. Mickelson birdied. Koepka double bogey. Next thing you know, Phil's on top again. And for the rest of Sunday, it was, sweaty palms time as an ode to the late great Fred McLeod. But those of us on Phil's side were nervous the entire round because you never know what's going to happen with him. And yet he battled, he persevered, he grinded, and next thing you know, he's hoisting the Wanamaker Trophy for the second time in his career. He also won in 2005, his sixth major title. And I'm still pinching myself. I can't believe that Phil Mickelson won the 2021 PGA Championship. And to an extent, neither can he, because I noticed this tweet from Phil. Although I believed it was possible, I can't believe this happened. And he has a montage of photos from Kiowa Island in South Carolina where he won it. And then I'm looking at the responses to Phil, to that tweet. And one of them is from Will Brinson. It says, "This looks pretty smart from a few weeks ago. Congrats." And it's Mickelson from the Twitter account on May 11th. "I've failed many times in my life and career, and because of this, I've learned a lot. Instead of feeling defeated countless times, I've used it as fuel to drive me to work harder. So today, join me in accepting our failures. Let's use them to motivate us to work even harder." I mean, you talk about poignant tweets and forecasting something. I mean, that's an incredible tweet, given that it came a couple of weeks before Phil won the PGA Championship. And he is if nothing else, Mickelson is resilient. He keeps coming back. He refuses to lose, or be waylaid by losing. He constantly is coming back. He's constantly trying to get better. He has an unbelievable belief in himself. And that's part of the reason why he won this past weekend, because he believed when few else did. And, the fact that he did it on the Kiowa Island course, and it's really not a course that's suited for Mickelson, and he's up against all these bombers, these young guys, and he goes out there and triumphs. And part of the reason that he was even able to get around for 4 days on such a demanding course is because of his physical conditioning. He's put himself in tremendous shape, and a lot of those who have watched him play would say that he's in better shape now, at least it appears that way, than he was even 10, 15 years ago. He's really taken his diet seriously, his fitness seriously, and he kept telling people after the victory on Sunday, he was doing as many interviews as he was asked, and he kept saying, all I could say to people as far as age goes is that you can still accomplish your goals. It's just going to take more work. And you've got to put the work in if you want to see the results as you get older. And he also said that he didn't think he had been playing as poorly as the results indicated. And that's part of the reason why he believed when maybe other people didn't, or he had more belief, because I don't think he could have imagined, as he tweeted, that he was going to win it. But he certainly felt like he could contend because he thought he was playing better than the scores indicated. He just wasn't scoring. And that can happen in golf, where you're playing well, but you're not scoring, or you're scoring and you're not playing particularly well. So it's been an amazing, it was an amazing 4 days for me as a Phil fan. It was an amazing day today. Although I will say I took a lot of abuse. I referenced this at the top of the pod. I took a lot of abuse on Twitter because the Freezing Cold Takes tweet account drudged up a tweet, and producer extraordinaire Chase Smith of the Press Play Podcast Network is looking at me through the computer right now, and he's got a big smile on his face. Yeah, I was called out on Twitter by Freezing Cold Takes, I think it is, where I had a tweet. Honestly, I do not remember tweeting it, but it was from 2012, I think. And I said, Phil Mickelson is done. It's been a great career. It's been fun, but he's finished. And so that got thrown back at me, 9 years ago. And I got hammered on Twitter. Oh, look at how stupid you sound. La, 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 la. And by the way, he won the Open Championship the next year. It was either a 2011 or 2012 tweet. And he wound up winning the Open Championship in 2013, his first Open title and his fifth major. So I was definitely getting it for that. And I got it for yesterday after the first hole. I bailed on Phil when he bogeyed and Koepka birdied and Koepka took over the lead. I said it's been a fun tournament, a lot of fun while it lasted. Same kind of thing. And I got hammered for that. And honestly, I tried to rationalize it by saying it's a reverse jinx. And I believe that to a degree, because I kind of like to soften the blow where it comes to Mickelson, so that if he does blow it, I don't feel as bad. But it was stupid to have tweeted in 2011 or 12 that he was finished. It was stupid to tweet after one hole yesterday that he was going to lose. And, thanks for the memories and thanks for the ride. And it's a lesson that I've never really learned with Phil, because there have been other times where I, as I mentioned, I've sworn him off. I haven't necessarily tweeted it, but I've gotten frustrated with him and how he played in a particular event. And I said, that's it. I'm never rooting for Phil again. And next thing you know, as soon as he's teeing it up again, I'm right back there in his corner. And so that's just the wild ride you go on with Phil. And I took the abuse on Twitter. Okay, fine. I do find it interesting that people seem to get satisfaction out of wagging a proverbial finger in your face on social media. It's like, really, that's what gets you happy, is showing me my place. Oh, yeah, look at you. You look like a fool. Okay, great. You got me. You win, I lose. But most importantly, Phil won, and it's a glorious time. if you are a Mickelson fan, and there are a lot of Mickelson fans. And by the way, that tweet that he sent out where he said, although I believed it was possible, I can't believe this happened. At the time we're taping, 56,000 likes, 263 quote tweets, and 3,400 retweets, and bazillion comments. So Mickelson, incredibly popular. Ratings were beaucoup. He moves the needle like nobody other than Tiger Woods. I've maintained that Woods and Mickelson are, the needle movers on this tour still to this day. As old as they are, Eldrick in his early 40s, Mickelson approaching 51. Those two guys are still ratings gold, and they trump, in my mind, anybody else on tour, even Koepka, as talented as he is, or Rory, or, DeChambeau, or any of those guys. Give me Mickelson, give me Woods whenever possible. And CBS had to be absolutely ecstatic with the fact that Mickelson was there the entire week and, was in the final group, and they had incredible theater. He won by 2. He was 6 under. He won by 2. And what's cool, too, when I think about Phil Mickelson, it wasn't just that I was a fan of his or have been a fan of his. I did get to cover a bunch of his events. When he came to Akron for the WGC at Firestone, and even before that, the World Series of Golf, when he won that one year, I was covering it with the great George Sweda of the Plain Dealer and others. Tim Rogers, awesome golf writer as well, Bert Grafe, Bud Shaw, Bill Livingston, the whole gang. And so Mickelson, and they would attest that Mickelson was my favorite player, and it was fun following him inside the ropes for a number of tournaments. I got to follow Woods when he was at the top of his game at the WGC. So that was really cool. Unfortunately, the WGC is no longer at Firestone. It's moved on to Memphis, the headquarters of FedEx. And the senior tour has replaced it with I think the Players Championship. Well, they're not going to get Phil anytime soon because Phil has got a 5-year exemption in the majors, and he's going to keep playing. And who knows, he might be the first guy to win the Masters when he's 55 and the Open Championship when he's 60. Now, who's going to count him out? I mean, he's even being talked about as a possibility next month at the U.S. Open when it's played in his backyard at Torrey Pines. So that's what 1 week will do, 1 week of success. And the other reason I'm excited about Phil winning the PGA Championship is it allows me to go into the Wayback Machine and talk about the 2005 PGA Championship. That was his first of 2 PGA Championship titles. When we return to the Dennis Maniloff Show, Season 1, Episode 9, I'll give you my little story about how I watched the 2005 PGA Championship and how cool it was at that point.
Hello, Brooks here with the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We read 1 book a month and then we talk about it. Books like Stephen King's The Shining or Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. If you're on the hunt for book recommendations and enjoy sparkling conversation, come read along with us and then listen in.
It's not a rumor, it's the truth. Ray Guy and Rhoda are back together again with the R&R podcast on the Press Play Podcast Network. We're going to talk Browns. We're going to talk Cavs, Indians, even if they're not playing well, which might happen. We're going to talk monsters. We're going to talk college football. You name it. When it comes to sports, Ray Guy and Rhoda, we're going to break it down for you as only we can. So make sure you join us right here on the Press Play Podcast Network.
Want to hear more about your favorite TV shows and movies that are on countless streaming services?
Then listen to Up Next with your new favorite hosts, me, Kristen Aviles,
and me, Christina Walter.
Every other week, we'll highlight one genre, but 2 movies or TV shows, one old and one new.
We'll let you know what's hot and what's not from your favorite
Or least favorite.
streaming services.
And be sure to stay tuned to the end of each episode where we shout out an artist whose name you should know for their talent in the industry.
So follow us to stay up to date with your favorite hosts from Up Next.
A part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Dennis Maniloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. This is Season 1, Episode 9. First segment talked about Phil Mickelson winning the 2021 PGA Championship, the most improbable of victories. Phil's 6th career major title, his 2nd PGA Championship. The first was 2005. I take you back to 2005, August of that year. And that Monday, you say, well, why is Monday important? Well, PGA Championship in 2005 did not end on time. It spilled over into Monday because of weather. Well, the previous week, I had gotten an assignment from my sports editor, Roy Hewitt, the late, great Roy Hewitt from the Plain Dealer. And he had said that Wilson Manufacturing is having an outing at Sandridge Golf Club on the east side of Cleveland. And, I mean, it's out in, I think, Mayfield, but it's on the east side. He said that, would you like to go out there because you're going to have an opportunity to caddy for Pádraig Harrington? And I said, yeah, respectfully, Roy, is the sun hot? I mean, you're darn right I want to get out there. Give me that assignment now. And he was, gracious enough to do it to me. So that Monday comes and I go out to Sandridge in the morning, and it's a beautiful track, beautiful golf course. And I'm waiting, we're all waiting for Pádraig Harrington. And it is because Harrington was he played Wilson clubs. He might still play him to this day, but Pádraig Harrington, a big name. Okay. He was a big name at that point, and certainly on the world scene because of what he had done in Europe, the Irishman, Pádraig Harrington. So we're waiting on Harrington, and he gets there straight from the airport. Now, he had been cut in the 2005 PGA Championship. So he arrives on Monday, and they're still finishing it. This was, if you were old enough to remember, this was the event where Tiger Woods was in contention, but he made the calculus that he wasn't going to be able to win it. And so he left. He was gone when he was gone from the grounds. He was at home when they finished it at Baltusrol. So Mickelson is battling Steve Elkington and Thomas Bjorn. Mickelson winds up winning by one shot over, I think, both of them. He birdied the 72nd hole, the par 5. Flop shot out of the rough and tapped it in. Well, I watched the end of the 2005 PGA Championship in the clubhouse at Sandridge with a bunch of people, including Pádraig Harrington. I was sitting a couple of feet from Harrington and his caddy and some of the Wilson people as we're watching it on TV. And Harrington is a very quiet guy for the most part, and he was quiet in watching this thing finish. But I was really excited because I was a Phil fan. So I'm kind of like, yeah, all right, yeah. I'm making some noises. And we had been introduced when he first came in the room, so he knew at least my name. He'd never met me until then, but he knew who I was because I had said, okay, I'm Dennis Maniloff. I'm the guy who's supposed to be, quote unquote, caddying for you on this corporate outing. So then we watched the end of the 2005 PGA Championship. I'm excited. He's not. We leave the clubhouse and we get in a golf cart to drive out to the first tee. And Harrington turns to me and he goes, and I don't even want to try to do his Irish accent because it was terrible injustice to him. But it's a phenomenal accent, the Irish twang that he has. But he says to me, "Why are you so excited?" And I said, "Well, because Mickelson won." And he goes, "Why are you excited that Mickelson won?" And I said, "Well, because I'm a big fan of his." He goes, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, okay." He said, "What if I told you I'm a big fan of Thomas Bjorn?" And I said, "Oh, okay." And he deadpanned it. He said it with a straight face. Bjorn being one of the guys who had just missed out on what would have been his first and only major. And he and Bjorn were good buddies. So while I was ecstatic, Harrington was not ecstatic because his guy had not won. So he deadpanned it like, "Yeah, what are you doing getting so?" And then he kind of chuckled and he's like, "Yeah, that's all right." He says, "You can go ahead and get excited about Phil and good for him." And he was very gracious about it. So we go to the first tee and Paddy Harrington had never set foot on the property. He had never seen Sandridge Golf Club. He gets out of the cart. He had not swung a club because he went straight from whoever drove him to the course. He got out of the car. He went into the clubhouse. He watched the end of the the PGA Championship, and then he and I went out to the first hole. He hadn't practiced, nothing, zero, nothing, had never seen the course. Proceeds to shoot a 64. How do I know this? Because I scored it. He didn't even care if I was scoring it, but I was like, I'm scoring a round that Paddy Harrington's playing when I'm supposedly his caddy, and I'll get to that in a second. He shoots a 64 and left 5 putts on the lip. He could have shot a 59 at Sandridge Golf Club from the tips with no practice, never having seen the course. He did have his pin seeker, which you saw at the PGA Championship. They were using the pin seeker. The PGA Championship allowed it. Those, the little binoculars that tell you what the distances are. And it was a device that was at that time was allowed by the R&A, the Royal and Ancient Golf Rules, specifically would be allowed overseas. But as far as I knew, the pin seekers were not allowed in the United States. But he was using it obviously because it's a corporate outing, and he certainly didn't trust me with the yardages. So he was getting the pin seeker out to check his distance. But absolutely flawless golf by Paddy Harrington. No surprise, I guess. But at the same time, when you see a 64 shot in front of you that easily could have been a 59, you sit there and you go, oh my goodness, these guys really are on a different plane than the rest of us. I mean, even the best amateur is a terrible player compared to the worst pro. Otherwise, the best amateur would be a pro if they chose to, if they're eligible to become pro. So Harrington put on a clinic, and part of the reason he put on a clinic at Sandridge that day in August of 2005 was because he told me that even though I am officially his caddy for this outing, I am not going to help him one bit with anything that I tell him to do. Therefore, it's best of me to keep my mouth shut. And he said it politely and with a smile. He was very cordial, but he's like, look, if you think you're going to read the greens or you're going to give me some tip on how to turn my hand over on a 5-iron, forget about it. He says, I don't tell you how to be a journalist. You don't tell me how to golf. Deal? And I'm like, yes, deal. But he couldn't have been nicer. I love Paddy Harrington. That day, I've loved him ever since. I didn't know him before that, but I always felt like he was a pro's pro. An absolutely great dude. And we had a blast. We really did. And that's the other thing. He shot a 64, even though I was talking his ear off. He was distracted every other second because I was asking him bazillion questions because I'm writing a story. I was eventually going to write a story for the Plain Dealer. And so I'm trying to get it, and he knew that. And so I'm filling up the tape with all the interview questions, and he couldn't have been nicer. He couldn't have been more loquacious and just he had all sorts of stories. And I'll never forget, middle of the round, I got out of the cart because we were doing a cart thing. It wasn't like I was toting his bag. He had the bag in the back of a golf cart. As I said, my title was caddy, but all I was really doing was driving the golf cart because it was a corporate outing. And I would drive, Potty was in the passenger seat, and then he would jump out to hit his shot. But there was a time where he and I were walking down the fairway, and I think his caddy, his regular caddy, had taken the cart up to the green. And we were talking as we walked up the fairway, and we talked about our late fathers. And it was pretty emotional. And I got to say, both of us were talking about how valuable, how important our fathers were to us in our lives. And we also got to talking about how Pádraig Harrington's dream was, of course, to win the Open Championship. That was everything to him as far as golf was concerned. Win the Open Championship. They don't call it the British Open. We do, but they call it the Open Championship. And he just hadn't been able to win it. Had a look at it, I think, twice to that point, but didn't win. And I said to him, you know what? You're going to win it someday. Now, this wasn't a great Swami moment where I just said, hey, Potty, I promise you, I guarantee you're going to win the Open Championship. But I told him, I said, you're too talented. You're a European-based player. You love that tournament. You're going to win it. And he was like, thanks. And I appreciate that. 2006, he didn't win it. But in 2007 and 2008, Pádraig Harrington won the Open Championship. Back-to-back years, 07 and 08. And the 07 one, of course, 2 years removed from 05, which was when, we were talking on the course. But I'm sure a million people told Harrington that he was going to win the Open. Just hang in there, keep your head up. But I like to think that, he heard me. No, just kidding. But I was one of the people that told Potty he was going to win the Open, and he wound up winning them back-to-back. He also won the PGA Championship in 08. So he has 3 majors to his credit. And, oh, by the way, this past Sunday night, top 5 finish for Pádraig Harrington at the PGA Championship. He finished tied for 4th. So good for Harrington. And, when you root for guys, professional players, it's easy to root for people like Pádraig Harrington, the genuine article. Now, Phil Mickelson, I never got a chance to quote-unquote caddy for Phil. I've never sat down with him one-on-one. I was part of media scrums with him, at Firestone on a number of occasions. But I as I said, I followed him playing in Akron under the ropes. But I never had any sit-downs with him, and I'm just another member of the media who had a brush with him in Akron for a few years. But he seems like a guy that's easy to like too, because he's a fan favorite. A lot of people have looked at him as like the Arnold Palmer of his era because he relates to the fans so well and he signs all the autographs and everything. Now, in fairness, I don't want to dump on Phil too much, but there was some jealousy within the player ranks about Phil, and sometimes they weren't. They didn't always buy Phil's public perception. They said that there's a behind-the-scenes Mickelson that's not as affable, not as friendly as you would think. Not to say he was a bad guy, but just these players were like, oh yeah, you guys all think that he's Mr. Good Guy, and the reality is there's an edge to him too. And I think Tiger resented that a little bit over the years because he was perceived as like the Dark Knight, this bad guy, or this ultra competitive guy who was sort of mean out on the course, whereas Phil was such a fun loving guy. And Tiger's probably like, well, wait a minute, Phil is just as competitive as I am. He just doesn't show it with his facial expressions or throwing clubs or swearing on the course. But Mickelson is an easy guy to root for at the end of the day, and he deserves all the credit that has come his way, all the adulation that has come his way. And it really is remarkable when you look at his career. 24 top threes in majors, including the 6 victories, 3 Masters, 2 PGAs, and 1 Open Championship. 6 runners-up at the U.S. Open. So it's unfortunate he hasn't been able to complete the career slam. Maybe it happens next month. I don't want to say I doubt it because I don't want to get Twitterverse screaming at me for, raining on the Mickelson parade. But he has had a remarkable career, even though he hasn't won the U.S. Open, even though he has never been ranked number 1 in the world, 700-plus weeks in the top 10, but never number 1. He's gotten as high as number 2. That's really astonishing when you think of other guys who have been number 1, and Mickelson never has been. But what a performance by Phil Mickelson at the PGA Championship, his 45th career PGA Tour title. He's one of the all-time greats, and congratulations to Phil on a wonderful week. All right, when we return for the final segment of the Dennis Maniloff Show, Season 1, Episode 9, a birthday shout-out.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
Hi, my name is Sam Post, owner of Phenomwell CBD Store and PhenomwellCBD.com. That's like phenomenal, PhenomwellCBD.com. Tune in where we talk with experts about how the amazing hemp plant can make a difference for people's health and well-being from the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey, it's Tito, host of the Premier Fantasy Podcast. Get all the news and analysis you need to dominate your fantasy league. I've been doing this as long as anybody in the business. I can help give you the edge in your leagues. It's the Premier Fantasy Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, my name's Jeremy Powell, co-host of the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast. Check us out anywhere you listen to podcasts. For all your Browns coverage, post-game, pre-game, anything you need Browns, you'll find it here on the Oranges, Oranger, Browns podcast.
Hey, it's JD from the Hyman Podcast. I created this podcast to have hard conversations. Conversations that make us human but are also wildly uncomfortable. Conversations that help give voice to the voiceless and to the marginalized. Now you can listen to the entire first season on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. Consider this your personal invitation to join the conversation.
Welcome back to the Dennis Maniloff Show, part of the Press Play Podcast Network, Season 1, Episode 9. The final segment is reserved for a very special person. The best segment, in this case, is the last segment. Happy birthday to my daughter, Grace. Grace Maniloff turns 14 on Tuesday, May 25th. So as we're taping tonight, it'll be tomorrow. Turns 14, and I'll tell you what, a father could not be prouder of a child than I am of my daughter, Grace. She's amazing in so many ways. She's given me so many reasons for joy since the second she was conceived. I praise God. I thank God for the gift of Grace every single day that she's been alive. I'm just in awe of what she's accomplished to this point. I know there's so much more ahead of her, but just in her 14 years, it's been incredible. And I'm just, I'm a little emotional because I think about what she has meant to so many people, and specifically to me, to her mother, to her stepmother, my wife, Denise. We love her dearly. All of the family members, we love Grace. And what I've really appreciated about her, and of course, I'm allowed to brag about my daughter in general, but I'm specifically going to brag about her on the Dennis Maniloff show because it's my show and Chase is allowing me to say whatever the heck I want. So I'm going to brag about my daughter till the cows come home. But she is just a good person, and that's the start. And that's what I love about her. She's a really, really, really good person, and then she adds on with all the other stuff. And that's such a wonderful place to begin with, being a genuine article. And then, you can be the great, you can work hard in school, you can work hard in sports, you can do the civic stuff, you can do all the other things. But to have your core being be as genuinely decent and kind and loving as Grace's is, that is a beautiful thing. And so I'm so proud of her. I'm so thankful for everything she has done in her short life, and I can't wait to see what she has in store next. Tuesday night, the night of her birthday, Denise and I are scheduled to go watch her play soccer on her birthday, with her teammates and everything else. And so we're excited about that, but just it's a time too, when I think about my daughter's birthday, it's a time to reflect and realize, don't take anything for granted. Especially if you have children, be grateful, be thankful for what you have. Don't take anything for granted, and appreciate every day for what it brings. And that's how I'm with Grace. I appreciate every day. I appreciate her smile. I appreciate her brain. I appreciate her work ethic, her love for her fellow man and woman, just everything she's about. And so, Grace, happy birthday, and I love you dearly, and you are the best. All right, that wraps it for the Dennis Maniloff Show, Season 1, Episode 9, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. Thank you very much for listening. We'll talk to you soon.